We went into personal debt. We didn't make payroll many times. There's no health care. There's nothing.
Listen, I just don't think these 35-page voter guides matter anymore. And so we thought, how can we reach people in a more effective way, in a moving way, like win their hearts? What if instead of a voter guide, we did like a movie trailer where we just got people excited about this is what matters?
I remember praying, God, either help this to work or make it fail.
Spoiler, it worked. This viral video paved the way for Catholic Vote to produce a pro-life Super Bowl commercial that was ultimately rejected, The Loop, a morning newsletter read by 500,000 Catholics every day and counting, and to lead the charge against the Dodgers to boycott them for supporting the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. These guys aren't millionaires or media savants. They're two Catholic dads from the Midwest. And I got the rare opportunity to sit down in the same room to talk to them about some of their early gambles, some of their biggest mistakes, and some insider knowledge on what's to come for Catholic Vote. Welcome to the Catholic Vote episode of the LOOPcast. God bless everyone. Welcome back to the LOOPcast. Today I'm joined by two very special men. I'm going to introduce them really quick. Brian, if you want to give a quick pitch to the viewers.
Brian Burch, president, co-founder of Catholic Vote, with my co-founder, Josh Mercer.
Josh Mercer.
That's right, editor of the Loop and the third most important person on the LOOPcast.
We miss you, Erica. Take me back to the beginning. What was the original vision for Catholic Vote? Why'd you guys start it?
The truth is, both of us were working at Domino's Farms in Ann Arbor. Tom Monahan, some of the listeners may know, sold Domino's Pizza, takes that money, starts the Ave Maria Foundation, and decides, I'm going to, as he said, try to get to heaven and take as many people as I can with me. Great vision. Jokingly said, I could have bought a yacht. I could have bought multiple yachts. Instead, decides to start all these Catholic ministries. And Josh was working for the entity called the Ave Maria List, which was started by Tom to engage politically. They spent money that Tom chose to spend in politics. I was working for a group called the Thomas More Law Center, which was, as we called it, the Catholic answer to the ACLU, which is this public interest law firm. We would engage in litigation, represent people pro bono to try to advance various issues. And as a result of some fights with the town of Ann Arbor, Tom decides, I'm going to go build not just a university, not in Ann Arbor, I'm going to go to Florida. I'm going to build a town, Ave Maria, Florida. Right. That was pretty disruptive at the time for all of the people up in Ann Arbor because there was a choice a lot of people had, whether to go to Florida or to stay or to leave. And so we had to question, do we want to keep doing this? Should we go find another job? And we came up with this idea, which was, let's take legal advocacy, political advocacy, and education, put it all under one roof. At the time, the model that we chose was to build a 501c3 and a 501c4. That's kind of tax lingo for being able to do politics and education inside the same umbrella of entities, which now a lot of people do.
And that was pretty revolutionary at the time, though.
Yeah, I mean, revolutionary gives us too much credit. I mean, the idea was we wanted to do for the church anything the church needed coming from the laity. And before it was you were either an education group, you were a lobbying group, you were a PAC or a elections group. And as a result of a couple Supreme Court cases, chiefly one called Citizens United, it allowed these nonprofit entities like that we had established to do electoral politics modestly. It can't be your primary purpose. And to do a number of things that we're now doing. But the big story here was we saw an opportunity to be a unique voice for Catholic lay people. When it comes to politics and legislation, lobbying, a lot of people say, oh, well, that's the bishops, the USCCB, or they look to single issue organizations, right to life groups, pro-life groups.
Marriage groups at the time.
Marriage, exactly at the time. And we said, no, we're not going to be a single issue group like everyone else in DC. We're going to be Catholic, which means we're going to be an every issue group. Right. We believe the church's wisdom is relevant and should have a seat at the table of every issue we're having: immigration, wages, economy, the environment.
Yeah, and just for people listening that may unfamiliar with the story, so you set out on this new journey of, Tom Monahan, he's off to go educate Tom, the host here at Ave Maria University. And so you guys are kind of had to make a tough choice. Do we continue this, really be scrappy? I mean, I think, didn't you take a job at Home Depot at one point? I mean, it was just real tough times in the beginning.
There were these attempts to start a Catholic grassroots network. I'm not saying this was a foolish idea. It was like, go find someone who's got a lot of money who can give us like a bounty of 200, 300 grand, hire a bunch of people, and then work really hard to hopefully get this plane off the ground, right? That's what Tom Monahan did too. I applaud him. But the problem is, if you get impatient and after 2 years, you're like, we're done, turn the lights off. And then you're left with nothing. So we went the opposite way where we're like, we're just dads, you know? we're like, let's just, maybe it'll be a little hand to mouth, but we're just gonna work hard to get those $10, $20, $30 donations and try to, with email, we're able to cut through everyone. I know it sounds crazy to think about it now, but we're talking 18 years ago. With the internet, and we're the first ones to really revolutionize video.
Okay.
Right?
I want to talk about that. So one of my favorite early Catholic Vote stories is the big gamble, putting it all in black. We're going to make a video, not only a video, a Super Bowl commercial. So take me back to that.
Well, the first one, the Super Bowl was the second one, but there's the urban legend that Fred Smith, the CEO of FedEx, I don't know if this is true or not.
It's true.
Is it true?
It is true.
He could make payroll, so he literally takes money and he goes to Vegas.
He went to Vegas.
And he puts it on black or whatever, and it hits, and he gets the money and he goes and makes payroll. I mean, it's when you're upstart businessman, you're like,
We didn't go to Vegas, by the way.
We did not. We did not. But it was a thing where it's like, we're scrappy and we got to try something new. And I remember I was at a conference with a bunch of Catholic leaders, political leaders. We're talking about the political stuff, and I just said, "Listen, I just don't think these 35-page voter guides matter anymore. People we want them to read it, but it's like your vegetables. Like, yeah, I'll read it, I promise, and then they go home and they don't read it. It just collects dust." And so we thought, how can we reach people in a more effective way, in a moving way, like win their hearts? Like Brian was like, well, what does Hollywood do? They do this obviously mostly for ill, but they're at least trying to capture your human imagination. They're trying to reach your heart and appeal to you. And so that's why he's like, what if instead of a voter guide, we did like a movie trailer where we just got people excited about this is what matters. And I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, I would have never thought of this in 100 years. I'm like, go for it. And it felt like that Fred Smith, like you gotta try something new, go for it. And
at this point, just you two, correct? You two, maybe one other person?
Yeah, I mean.
No, it was just us two at that point. We didn't have the money even to pay us two.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the truth is there's a little bit more backstory here. We did try to go the traditional route. There was a document called Catholics in the Public Square, written by Bishop Olmsted
right.
in Arizona. Yeah. Fantastic document, highly recommend it. Everyone should read it. So we thought, wow, we can take this document, which we thought was superior to the bishop's document, which was a document called Faithful Citizenship, which is still principally the document they use. We believe that document has some flaws to it, which it does if anyone reads it. And this document was what's better. By the way, if anyone's listening, the best document the bishops ever wrote on this question, 1998, Living the Gospel of Life. That should be the only document anyone should read when it comes to these things. In any case, all those things are things, as Josh said, no one reads, or very few people read. Right. The idea of the movie trailer was, let's actually think about how most voters come to the decision about how to vote, and especially swing voters. And we realized, most people probably don't read a 35-page document from the bishops and weigh the intellectual merits of it, and then ultimately connect it prudentially to the candidate that we think deserves support, and vote for them. No, they don't do that. The church has a huge catechetical problem that's going to take a generation or more to solve. We're certainly not going to solve it in the crucible of an election, right? But all we would ever hear is we just need more from the pulpit. We need the bishops to speak with more clarity. We started jokingly calling that internally the catechism in a bigger font strategy. Right. That's all we need. Just louder, bigger, longer, all caps.
Flashing maybe.
Right. And the thing is we knew that wasn't doing the trick. And so the idea with the movie trailer was, let's provoke the imagination. Let's get someone actually just interested in what we have to say. And then the voter guides and other things can follow, and some of that's out there. But let's make people, fall in love before they fall in line.
And I always think of it like, there has to be a better appreciation for the recipient. And I think that's what we've always made a big focus at what we do at Catholic Vote. Like, like a lot of other people be like, why won't people read this 35-page document? Why it explains everything. It's like, people are busy. They have busy lives. If you're a mom of 6, you're homeschooling kids or whatever, or a guy's working as a plumber, he doesn't got time for this. His wife's yelling at him to finish the deck. So it's like, get what you're trying to get at, short and sweet, and then help them, like you say, pull them along, and they might start to read more. So that's kind of been one of the things that I think has kind of guided our work. Try to understand people are busy. And that's like, even with social media, people are skimming fast. How do you get their attention? You have to do it in a way that's not, total gimmick kind of stuff. Right. And there has to be something there. If it's just cotton candy, then they'll ignore you. But
this is the ain't nobody got time for that excuse. No, but the thing is we were father, I call him father because he was father then, Bishop Robert Barron before he said this. And it was this, one of the best things that Bishop Barron has ever said is he talks about the challenge of evangelization. And he said, there's the 3 great transcendentals, the true, the good, and the beautiful. And for the most part, our side typically begins with the true and the good. That's not good, that's bad. That's not true, that's false. But they never begin with the beautiful. And he said, I'm convinced more and more that our culture really needs, and the church has so much to offer, of going through the beautiful door. And then we can get to the true and the false and the good and the bad. And that one of the things that video does, and certainly if you watch the video we did, that was one of the emphasis. We wanted people to see something so beautiful and transformative, and especially it was the music. It was the music too. It was that's what good art does. It transforms you.
For those who haven't seen the video, can you describe what it was?
It was a 3-minute, of course, this was 2008. And so there's, it wasn't exactly to today's standards.
I think it holds up.
It was exceptional, huge, epic music track together with text and moving images. So it described essentially what voter guides described and talked about all these issues that were important. But there was these core issues that life, marriage, and family, and it crescendoed into voting for life with this mother, with this child on her shoulder, with this, really.
Well, it was also not like typical. I mean, like there's pictures of NFL players praying on the field. It wasn't just like a typical.
We used John F. Kennedy in the ad, right?
I know.
What conservative Catholic group used the picture of John F. Kennedy? Or we used, by the way, the former president of Notre Dame,
right,
Theodore Hesburgh, Father Hesburgh, the famous shot of him locking arms with MLK. This was not something a so-called Republican-aligned organization would do, but we said, look, this was something
part of our stories.
Important that Catholics did. It was also a reach out to people that might be sympathetic as Democrats to that, saying, look, that's connected to the life issue. These are not 2 separate things.
No, that brings up something really important I want to talk about too. So obviously that video goes crazy, millions of views. It's up on our YouTube channel actually, by the way. And deep cut, the poster behind me on every Loopcast is the poster from that video. It's the mom holding the child. But something I want to talk about. So you mentioned you're doing something that is unexpected. And I think people that when they see Catholic Vote content or they see something we're a part of, it's a little bit provocative. When you think about, okay, we want to make an impact here, how does that play into, say, your storytelling style for campaigns? Or do you have a good example of another time? I know we have a couple videos that have gone viral for good or bad reasons. Ones that come to mind are Not Alone. I don't know if you remember that one or...
Well, I mean, you can think about different campaigns like that video or whatever, but then it's, again, just thinking about, again, all of it has to be in service to the people you're trying to, illuminate, educate, whatever. So like, for example, I think, an advocacy group, you always have to be thinking about what's 5 or 10 years, what does the church need 5 or 10 years from now? That really needs to be a guiding thing in everything you're planning or working on. And so if you would have said in 2005 when we were starting, hey, by the way, what you really need to do is be not just an advocacy organization, but you need to be like a news organization too. Like you need to write articles, you need to put together a daily email and send it to people. Like that, we would never thought that would have, we'd have thought, well, no, what we really need to do is raise money and help elect candidates. That's really important, don't get me wrong. But it's like understanding, like I say, busy person in their life, what can you do to try to help them along in their journey? Here's some articles on the faith. Here's some articles about the issues that people are talking about at the water cooler where you work. People are talking about trans stuff, education, that kind of stuff. You need to be versed in what's going on. So,
yeah, I would say part of it too is this kind of question everything mentality. And Tom, you work here, so you know this didn't stop after we released that video. Said we finally accomplished it. The goal is, hey, I was in a meeting 2 weeks ago following that Ohio vote, and I led the meeting off by saying nothing should be unquestioned. We lost.
So just to help the viewers understand, what you're talking about is that the recent defeat of the Ohio, they try to strengthen the Constitution, make it harder to wreck their Constitution.
Great, and we went into a meeting and said, let's rethink everything. What we're doing isn't working as well as we want it to. There's some things we decided we need to retain. There's a lot of things we need to change. Yeah. But I think there's another piece of this is important, and it's come up recently in the context of the Ukraine war. And it was the posture of the American foreign policy for many decades, and it was, I forget his name, I think it was George Kennan, who talked about the idea of strategic empathy. And the idea was, in order to decide what the best posture for U.S. policy should be, you had to put yourself in the shoes of your enemy. And you had to think about what motivated them, why they're choosing to do what they're trying to do, and not interpret it only through your lens. Because if you do that, more than likely the decisions you make about what you're going to do are going to be uninformed or not quite responsive to what the other side's really thinking. And I think there's a lesson in that, not just for Ukraine, by the way, is what is Russia really doing? Why are they doing it? But for the task of evangelization itself, why do people that we're trying to reach have this hostility to the church or struggle with church teaching or see us as this, patriarchal, hierarchical
or the Ohio thing
problem
particularly.
thing.
Why would it be that some voters who might even be inclined to vote our way still feel, I just can't say no to this girl who wants to have the option to abort their child or whatever.
Right. But my point is, this is because it led to, the answer to your question, it's a really long-winded answer to getting there. How some of our best videos, I think, began with a conversation about what do our opponents or ideological adversaries, what are they thinking? What are their premises? Why do they believe what they do? And why do they believe, or what are the wrong ideas about what they think we believe? So we had, of course, that video we did called Not Alone, where we had a bunch of people talk about how they struggle to acknowledge this about themselves, that they are now going to come forward and tell the world how they really feel. And of course, this was the model of what gay rights groups were doing, is calling on people to, quote, come out of the closet and to acknowledge you were gay. And we framed that video as a bunch of young people coming forward with this very difficult struggle. And then they said, I believe in marriage. And that was the twist in the video. And of course, that thing, the gay...
I think Lance Bass picked it up, right?
Yeah, that's right.
It was one of the only videos where Hollywood spoofed us.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Lance Bass, the guy, boy band guy, yeah.
But the idea there was, again, to say, well, wait, you're expecting us to sympathize and empathize with you, your desire to tell the public that you are same-sex attracted. Well, what about us? If, in fact, we're supposed to respect you because of your personal beliefs, what about you respecting our personal beliefs?
Empathy is something universal we all should receive, and yet...
Yeah. But I think that strategic empathy kind of way of thinking is bigger than us. I think we often, on the right, think because we have the truth, because we know what's right, our job is now to impose it by any means necessary. That the real challenge is we just need to pound it into people harder and harder. I know as a parent that doesn't work. I'm pretty sure as a church we've discovered that's not quite working either. Certainly the culture is not positioned well for that to work. So I think some of our better, most successful videos at least have began with a conversation around that.
Yeah, and this brings up another thought too, and we have him at the table, the father of the loop. So we have a morning newsletter, just crossed 500,000 subscribers. Fun little fact, Josh, you do get 100 grand bars every time you reach a new milestone. You're at 500 grand bars.
Candy bars. Don't
lest anyone say. No. We're not talking bricks. We're talking...
not gold bricks.
Yeah. If we're...
I mean,
we're talking candy bars.
I wouldn't refuse it.
So here's something to think about, right? So Brian, you're kind of talking about like taking narratives or seeing things that are successful, but from a different point of view. And so you're basically trying to take success, but use it on our side of view, I guess. And so I think you kind of alluded to this. Would in a million years you think that you're going to start a news agency? No, but you see this opportunity where news, all of a sudden AP style is making people use pronouns to describe things. Like we can't even get, even from Fox News or whatever, we can't get really honest news anymore. So what inspired you then to start this daily newsletter, and why do you think it resonates and has been so successful with Catholics?
See, Brian and I both like to think about innovations. Like, what can we be doing differently? How can we help people understand, where the church is going to be? You always should try to have that hunger of an entrepreneur. And sometimes you come up with an idea totally on your own, totally out of the box, which is, I think, what the video 2008 is like. No one else was thinking this. Like, what other advocacy groups, like, we need to do a 3-minute, video that's a Hollywood trailer thing. So that's awesome. Sometimes, though, it's just like thinking about, like, well, wait a minute now. There's a lot of successful daily emails. National Journal, NBC News was the one that really started it. It's like, wouldn't it be neat if they had that for Catholics? Why don't we do that? Like, let's just do it, and let's have news that is, like, every Catholic would want to know what's going on in politics, what everyone's trying to do in Washington, but also just have, like, important news, pro-life, pro-family, and then news about our church.
Yeah, the thing is, it wasn't like some amazing revelation. The Loop was essentially a response to what people like us wanted. What would we do? We'd wake up in the morning. At the time, you'd read a site called the Drudge Report.
And other websites too, right?
Right, but that was a primarily one. It was an aggregator of news, and then you would click on a different website and read, the readings for the day. Then you would read something else, and we started to say, wait, what if we take the best of all these different places? And I know Josh gets this question asked, and people would always ask me, hey, what do you read for your news? Where do you go? And sometimes people still ask me, now I have an answer. But it was always this question of, hey, who do I trust? Who covers religion? Who's covering the church in a way that I think is authentic? And even some of the Catholic news stuff out there at the time, even today, was again, along the lines that we were talking about before, taking a different angle and slant when it comes to some of these issues of prudence. And so I think it was a response to what we saw a lot of Catholics wanted. They wanted a quick and easy way to get this combination of politics, national news, culture. We have lifestyle content now. Josh probably wasn't looking for a source for new recipes, but
those are the most clicked on articles in the Loop.
Sometimes. Well, I mean, part of it is just, a good author will say, the best book, I wanted to read this book and no one had it, so I wrote it. It's like, that's kind of what we did. We wanted this, and like, no one's doing it, and it's all in these different places. Let's put it together. And that's a great service to people. Like, it takes a lot of time to read all these different articles and, wait, I've never seen this website before. Do you trust it? So that's why I think people say thank you. And then we occasionally make mistakes. We own our lumps and we move on, but people, I think, respect that.
We got to put this out here for the record. It was almost under a different name. Are you willing to reveal what name it almost was?
Someone thought the skinny was a good idea.
Well, some listeners might know there's a daily email called the Skim. It was started just before the Loop was started. And that was one of the things we saw. That, wow, look, this email newsletter at the time had like hundreds of thousands. Now it has millions. Right. 2 single women talk about cosmetics and the news. Cosmetics, the news, culture, fashion. They were doing what they saw in the marketplace. And all these big brands started to pay them huge advertising dollars. So it was called the Skim, of course. Skim the news, Skim. Well, we're trying to figure out, well, what could our Catholic version of our, vision be? And one of the finalists was the Skinny. Get the Skinny. I'm going to give you the Skinny, the rundown. And I will just say, Josh said, I am not writing for anything called the Skinny.
Yeah, people watching this they could be sipping on their Skinny mugs, but instead we have the Loop.
The mugs would be very different.
I'm just too fat to be involved with the Skinny. But, part of at least the word loop is in, at least, stay in the loop, but also if you think about it, the rosary is also a loop. So there's
I thought you were going to bring up Chicago lore.
Well, our office was in the loop, yeah.
Yeah.
Not anymore though, because Chicago's,
yeah, we had to get out of there.
Third world country at this point.
Yeah. So Brian, you brought up something kind of interesting that I thought about. So I see this personally when I consume a lot of Catholic content. It feels very polished. I don't know how to put this. It's a little bit, it's not raw. And you brought up the word authenticity, which I actually, knowing you guys now for a little while, I feel like if nothing else, both of you are very authentic in my experience with you. And being authentic is a challenge in some ways because it requires a certain amount of vulnerability. Has it been challenging for you to remain authentic while also pursuing, the advocacy and education work?
When you said the things were polished, what are you saying was polished? Well, I don't understand what you're saying.
Not us. I'm saying like I see things that are very inauthentic, or they feel cold, or they feel distant.
Authenticity is one thing. Polished, when you say something's polished, you saying a lot of things in Catholic sites were too polished, or what?
When I see too polished, like maybe too slick's the right word, or like there's a distance between me and that organization. So like I don't feel like for example, when we read an email from Brian, like I feel like Brian's talking right now.
If it's a real person, because we really do try to impart what we think, like.
Yeah, but I agree with Josh. Typically when you see a lot of Catholic marketing material, polish is not the word that comes to mind.
Not polish. Sorry, I should have.
Well, I mean, like we've always tried to. Brian's done a very good job about this. Like the communications that we do from CatholicVote. I mean, Loop is one thing. I like to think of the Loop as having that Midwestern self-confidence. Like this is what we think. This is what we believe. Here it is. You can like it or not. We're not trying to shove it in your face. It's just we're cool cucumbers on it. But when you're talking about like the emails that Brian is sending out to our list of 400, 500,000 people, it's meant to be authentic or intimate. Like I'm just going to lay it out on the line here. I'm not going to BS you. This is what's going on. We didn't do so great here. Not just our organization, but everyone. Let's say Ohio, or actually, Dodgers. You know what? If we don't step up to the plate, who else is going to do that? We need to do this. It was nice to hear the bishop over here say something, and that bishop, but we got to punch back at these guys. So I think people just liked it. It's like, yes, the people think that someone out there is representing me. So we just try to be, you say authentic, yeah.
Well, it's interesting because you're making me think a little bit about this. We do have some internal rules we've kind of abided by. One of them was early on, we used to say, we're not sending an email unless we have something interesting to say.
Right.
Whereas a lot of people say, well, it's Thursday, so our Thursday email goes out. Well, there were times, I remember not too long ago, where we'd go a week, 2 weeks, we wouldn't send an email. And we would say, gosh, we need to communicate with the list again. We need to tell them what we're doing. But we didn't want to just write for the sake of writing. And a lot of this was, again, thinking about our audience and the way we thought about ourselves. Right. What did we need to hear about? What were we thinking and talking about? In fact, we talk about this a lot. Even we have a product called Slack. It's a big corporate product which allows teams to communicate.
And helps because our team is
dispersed.
Dispersed.
15 states, yeah. But one of the things I always say is take what's happening on Slack and go and take it out. Meaning go put it on Instagram, take it to the Loop, put it in emails, because there's all this banter that goes on throughout the day. The Loop channels obviously are big. People may not know there's 10, 25, 30 stories that come in every day that your team works through to figure out.
I think what you're getting at is that like this digital water cooler that we have serves as a way of people, hey, did you see this, Tom? Hey, check this out. Like, wait a minute. If I think it's important enough to share with you and Brian's sharing it with me or whatever, like, why don't we share with our people on our list? They're going to want to know this stuff too. Now, I might slag it to you like, oh my gosh, you can't believe this is crazy. I might not say it that exact way, but the whole point is, I do have some filters, thank the good Lord. But
the Loop Unfiltered actually would be a very good product. All the stuff that doesn't make the cut, but that we still talk about.
We've definitely talked about doing like a Loopcast after dark for sure. And man, when that comes out, that might be the end of us. But actually, ironically, that you're bringing this up, that was the inspiration for the Loopcast. Was Slack conversations, was meetings. I mean, seriously, every time we meet with you, it's like, I got 3 stories coming. I'm like, why? Just get a microphone, tell people, I promise it's interesting. And funny, you mentioned the Midwestern, what was the phrase you used?
Midwestern self-confidence.
Listen,
okay, so
Midwestern self-confidence.
Let me give you the sports analogy on this, because I love sports, okay?
Yeah.
So, my brother went to St. John's University, which is Division II or whatever. It's a Catholic, supposedly, college in central Minnesota. And they had a coach there, John Gagliardi. He was there forever, and he actually was the winningest coach in all college football history. And he banned touchdown celebrations. He goes, Now listen here. When you get to the end zone, you set the football down or you hand it to the referee and then come back to the bench. Act like you've been there before. And I just love that. And one of the movies we always like to talk about in The Office is Miracle with Herb Brooks. Mm-hmm. And one of the points that he makes about the communists, right, the Ruskies, they're like, look at them. They're just so methodical. They just move and they just act like they're going to win because they know they're going to win. I'm like, you know what? I love that. I don't love the whole showy stuff. Like, just get out there and do your job and kill it and just have the satisfaction of doing it right. You don't need to go showboating, like, why are you trying to convince? Just do it. Just win. So I like that. It's a Midwestern self-confidence.
Midwestern self-confidence is good in some ways, but I think also can bite us a little bit sometimes because both of you really, in my experience, are almost too humble sometimes. Like, we would like to get you out in front of people.
He might
probably
be. I don't know
more-
about me.
No, there's a danger in this business, let's face it, where you can get a big ego and think,
Oh,
hey,
absolutely.
500,000 people are listening to me every day. I must be really important, and everything that comes out of my mouth is, let me prophesy today on what's going to happen in politics. I know I have, lots of opinions, and I'll have, lots of times that I predict stuff and gets wrong. I remember in the early days, and there's probably a little bit of truth to this, although we now have a couple employees in DC, we used to celebrate not being a DC-based org. Because we didn't have to worry about all the things that happen in that town. Am I going to get invited to this party and this meeting, and who's saying this about me? They probably did talk a lot about us, good or ill, and we never knew. So it didn't really matter because we weren't, naturally in that social environment. But I do think there is a particular kind of humility that marks the org, and hopefully it's something that emanates from us that I think is healthy. You have to have some humility in politics to begin with, because first of all, you typically lose just as often as you win.
Right. It's humbling.
If you win all the time, guess what? You put yourself out of business.
No, it's what are you winning?
Well, that's true. That's true as well.
It's like you've gained nothing, and the thing is, like, okay, so 500,000 people, that's kind of cool, but it's not like Anthony Robbins where he's out there and giving speeches and everyone recognizes him. Brian and I can go in any airport in the country, no one's going to recognize us. It's like, so like, might as well stay humble. But like, at the end of the day, it's kind of neat. We get some wins on the board, hopefully advancing what the church is doing. That's great.
Well, and the other thing is, you can go and speak to 1,000 people at a big Catholic conference, and then you go home and you're a father and a husband and you have kids and you live the life that everyone else lives. Right. It's not like you go back to your, Donald Trump apartment on top of, Fifth Avenue and live like a king. No, we're living the life that I suspect most people listening to this live, which keeps you humble and on its own.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, to paint the picture here, so you started with 2 people, you basically up to 3, and you were at 3 to 5 for many, many years. I think the first time we really started staffing up was 2019, 2020. So, and
slowly you started to add. Yeah.
It's like one of those things where it's like, they say this and you hear about different businesses. Wow, overnight success. Like, and you just laugh. Like, really?
Yeah. Well, I remember people saying
year 16.
Startup businesses, if they could make it to year 7, they were going to make it. And the truth is, those early years, it was day by day. And we're at a corporate offsite retreat. I think I might even comment a little bit about this tomorrow. I remember praying, God, either help this to work or make it fail, because one or the other. Because right now this in between is pretty tough. And there was, we went into personal debt. We didn't make payroll many times. There's no health care. There's nothing. Not until actually somewhat recently did we even add any of that. Yeah. But I think some of it was...
And just having the tenaciousness and then like reinvesting in what we're doing, because we really did believe it. I mean, we really did believe that this could be
I will say there was a lesson that I learned starting as a young business owner, nonprofit obviously, that probably people that have built businesses learned, which was when you have that next employee investment or that second or third or fourth person, it seems exceptionally risky. Because you don't necessarily have all that money and you don't know where the money's going to come from. You don't know if the donors are going to support you. You say, I guess we really need the help. We can't do this anymore. And you take that leap, and all of a sudden, all that value, if you hire the right person, comes back double fold. Right. And then you do it again, and then you do it again. You realize one of the reasons I think we started to really blow up and become successful is we started to take risks by investing in people, and like you, Tom, and many others. And when we did that, it just kept redounding back. Like, wow, we're now doing more stuff, getting our name out there more, and more people like it, more people are donating. And it kept going and going to the point where now I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we got to slow down. I used to be able to take a weekend off and not look at anything at work. And
you did.
Well,
I believe you took a week vacation.
I did this year.
Yep.
I occasionally checked in, but for the first time, probably since we started, I truly did check out for a couple days, mostly because I was at a national park with no cell service. But no, the truth is because we had a competent team that was able to execute and run the organization. Yeah. And that was very comforting and obviously a testament to all of you. But I think, hire and surround yourself with good people, and you're, at least in our experience, a lot of success follows.
I have a question about that. So both of you are obviously very involved in the hiring process. What are the absolute need to haves that you need to see in someone when you hire? Because I can speak to, from my experience, we have a great team here. We have almost no turnover. People, if they leave, they usually get a better offer. We've built a really...
Go to the private sector, because it's hard. It's not, no, it's true. I mean,
correct. But we have a really strong team here, and it's partially because of a lot of the hiring practices. So what do you need to have in someone when you hire them?
I mean, I always like the entrepreneurial spirit, like just again, having that kind of creativity, and that you can find that, whoever it is, like if you're doing graphics design, if you're a writer, like you always have to be thinking of, like I said, what's around the corner. That to me is having that insight is helpful, like being hungry.
There's another piece here, and people hopefully don't take this the wrong way. There's another member of our team that uses this term, and I love it. He says, we have to have killers.
Yeah.
And it's, of course, we don't want people that want to kill people, but we want people who have this real desire to win souls for Christ, to win for the gospel, to win in politics. You have to have that competitive spirit. Otherwise, you will not work.
We're in an age where we need to be apostolic again, so...
Absolutely.
That's like what Monsignor Shea, right? Yeah.
Fantastic. You have to have zeal and not being afraid of occasionally looking like a zealot. Again, with strategic empathy.
But we just have a lot of generations of Catholics where this is the way we do things, and we got to break some molds.
Yeah, well, I think what people find refreshing about CatholicVote and the Loop is like we do throw punches. Like, for example, with the Dodgers. Like the Dodgers is a great example of that, and I'd like to hear more because you obviously were pretty intimate with that. But it felt
Dodger
like
Stadium is
what could
totally
possibly
right now.
what could possibly be more insulting to me as a Catholic living in society than seeing black-faced drag nuns dancing on a cross and the Dodgers honoring this? Where are the people that should be standing up to that? So take me to that. How did you put this together? And like, I think the Dodgers really put us on the map for a lot of people. So take me to where that started and how that ended up playing out.
Oh boy, I actually remember where I first read the story because I was looking at my phone on a weekend when I shouldn't have been. And I see the story come across the Loop channel on Slack. So
we're communicating our water cooler, right?
Right. Well, someone's basically saying to Josh and his team, hey, make sure this makes it into the Loop. And so I see that story and I immediately send it to another guy on our team who is very into baseball. And I say, hey, let's get a letter to the Dodgers on this.
It's go time, right?
Yeah. And then I immediately said to our development team, hey, we're get ready for a huge ask. Meaning you need to go to our donors and ask for a lot of money because we're going to announce a media campaign against this as soon as we can get this letter out to the Dodgers. So we write the letter to the Dodgers, we fire that off, we draft a press release, we go to our media team, we announce it, we go to Fox News. Obviously,
and we won for 48 hours, right?
Yeah, and the next 3 weeks we basically didn't do anything else. I mean, it was one thing after the next. We were doing sometimes 10 to 20 interviews a day. I think it was the most Fox News hits we've ever had. I was going downtown Chicago at 4:30 in the morning to appear on Fox and Friends or Fox in the Morning, and from the studio there because it would record early. But it was fantastic coverage for us. But more importantly, I think we sent a message, and not to get into too many of the details, a couple weeks ago, I did sit down with the Dodgers CEO. We've agreed to keep the substance of that meeting off the record, but I will say I have a high degree of confidence that message sent. I don't believe it'll happen again. I think we helped him to understand how offensive this campaign really was. And I also believe that it wasn't just the Dodgers, that a lot of teams paid attention that, hey, these Catholics are pretty serious, and there is a line.
If you do this, you're going to open up a hornet's nest, right?
As I
Which is why our response mattered.
Absolutely.
That's why people need to understand it. It's like, I can't imagine, the Cleveland Guardians are like, maybe we shouldn't touch this, like just leave it alone.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of the Bud Light thing, where it's like, we don't need to cancel every beer that's doing some weird ad. Like, we just need to make it hurt enough for Bud Light, and then no one will do this. Like, no other beer will pick this up.
Yeah, by the way, on that subject, because this is something Target just announced its earnings this last week. Huge downturn because of pride. What did the CEO do? He said, it was those nasty conservatives that made the environment unsafe. Therefore, we're going to change some of our pride displays next year because we don't want these crazy anti-LGBT bigots creating unsafe environments. They blamed us. They blamed us for their own problem when we all know. Well, if you're still boycotting Target, keep it up, because
it wasn't just the trans stuff, though. Of course, it was the tuck stuff, like
of course.
Or not just the LGBT. Like it was the targeting for kids and then also that they had that satanic designer type guy. So yeah, I mean, obviously they're just
it's classic abuse.
Gaslighting.
It's abuser psychology, right? It's like it's throwing the first punch and then saying, no, you deserved it. You're actually the one that's wrong. I mean,
well, Target's probably feels like they're in a no-win scenario because they can't actually just say, yeah, maybe we should take a step back.
You know what? Then I disagree on this.
That's what they feel.
That's what they feel because that's what the high-paid marketing consultants tell them. What they aren't willing to do, so they take all the risk at avoid all the risk at our expense. They never say, you know what, we're going to actually be the company that's going to chart some common ground here and to say, we understand the public disagrees about this. What did Michael Jordan say? Republicans buy sneakers too. Right. You know what? There is a Republicans buy sneakers too path here, and to not be beholden to all these political groups. Even Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, when he came in recently, he came back.
Right.
He said, look, we're going to avoid a lot of this politics stuff. And there was a little backlash, but no one's willing to call the bluff. I think I said this in my guest appearance. This group isn't as powerful as everyone thinks they are. No one wants to call their bluff. And so what? They raise a fuss.
Well, you know why, though? So it's because they have the entire entertainment and media apparatus, which is like a Death Star on their side. And so
I would call it a Death Star that's empty on the inside. It's a big echo chamber, so it sounds really loud.
Well, it can still cause a lot of damage is the point, though.
Maybe. Count me as skeptical. Look at what Target's earnings did.
Cancel culture and stuff like that, you can cause some damage. So just because I do think they're outsized in their influence, it's not proportional.
I'm not saying, although I'd love it for Target to say, we now want to affirm traditional family, traditional marriage. We believe this is something that's being lost. That's not going to happen.
They don't have to go on the positive.
There is some common ground that these companies can find that don't overtly assault and insult us. Right. I mean, is that too much to ask? No. I think they would be just fine.
Right. Gentlemen, I have a lightning round as well. So if you could both, just one at a time, answer some questions I have for you in a couple of sentences. So first lightning round question, biggest mistake at Catholic Vote, one you wish you could have back?
Well, I mean, I think we're both honest about this one, that we probably shouldn't have issued a press release on a Saturday in October telling Trump that he should quit after I mean, it was very infuriating for Catholics who were pro-life to have a candidate make such an embarrassment to everybody, I think, with the inside whatever that was, the Access Hollywood tape. Yep. But that's the kind of thing where it's like something like that, the Republican National Committee, they need to issue a release on a Saturday. Like, should we have given that another 48 hours and thought through a little bit more sober response? Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty upfront about that. That would have been better. That would be I think the big one.
Yeah, I think that's the easy one to remember, although that's in retrospect. At the time, I still thought we were making the right decision as a Catholic organization that didn't want to throw our endorsement and support behind a man who, at least for us, we still didn't know how serious he was going to be about the things. Now, in retrospect, Trump got into office and delivered in spades in a lot of ways.
I mean, he's the one candidate who was more conservative in office than he was on the campaign trail. It's the total opposite.
Yeah, it's funny. When I see some people have seen me, they're like, "Oh, you work for Catholic Vote." They do remember. They're like, "You guys said no Trump back then, and I'll never forget that." And I mean, they still like Catholic Vote, of course, but it's kind of funny, like something I inherited because this is before I started working Catholic Vote. But I appreciate you.
I don't even know if you're old enough to vote then.
Well, another Josh story that he likes to tell, since he's the king of political trivia. George W. Bush was once asked the biggest mistake you ever made.
Yes.
And he paused. It was a presidential primary debate, and he said, trading Sammy Sosa. You gotta admire the
such a good
creativity
answer.
on the spot.
So good.
So I'll start with you on this one. Biggest fork in the road moment for Catholic Vote, where you felt like you had to choose one of two paths and you picked one or the other.
I mean, this may not have been the biggest, but it certainly was one of significance. 2005, George W. Bush nominates Harriet Miers to fill the position for the vacant seat left by Sandra Day O'Connor. This was after he had nominated Roberts to become Chief Justice. There's a second seat open. And I'll tell you, in retrospect...
But the second seat didn't open up right away.
Correct. But I'm saying Miers was nominated after Roberts. Roberts was nominated for the Chief Justice position. But, I mean, I could take you through the history. Sandra Day O'Connor announces she's going to retire.
We're all elated because
Right.
she's, even though she's appointed by Reagan, super liberal, pro-abortion.
Right. Bush nominates Roberts. Justice Rehnquist dies unexpectedly. So they take Roberts and they move his nomination over for Chief Justice, because of course you want to make sure you get the chief position filled. So
Because that's the
O'Connor's-
second thing you'd have to appoint. Because if he didn't pick Roberts to be the Chief Justice, he would have had to pick someone else on the court, and that person would have to go through Senate confirmation again. Clarence Thomas would not go through Senate confirmation again. He didn't. Right. No way. And so, like, well, what, who else do you pick? So
Right. So O'Connor's seat's open, and high drama. Who's it going to be? Who's it going to be? There was the final list that people were talking about. Harriet Miers.
his White House
His White House counsel, his friend from Texas. This was Sandra Day O'Connor all over again, if not worse, right?
And what did he say? Oh, trust me. Like, no.
Right. So if those of us that had worked on the Roberts confirmation, there was heavy pressure from Republican Party officials, from the White House, that everyone needs to fall in line. She's with us. I remember being on these private calls. No, she's totally pro-life. And she might well have been personally, but she didn't have the kind of judicial chops, the commitment to respecting the text and of the Constitution.
And no record.
And no record. So we had to make a decision. Are we going to actually publicly oppose the White House at a time when we're all fighting on the same team?
It's one thing not to not to be a cheerleader for it, but to actively oppose. That's obviously
Yeah, I mean, not only did we say we're not going to support it, we started a website called Withdraw Miers that started to publicly list all the people that were calling out for her to withdraw and all the people that had not. We know it made a difference because there was people inside the White House that were complaining and said, I remember specifically they said, for everything this president has done for you, I can't believe you're doing this. And we said, sorry.
And the thing is, and the lesson here too, they would say stuff like, we'll never work with you again. You guys are burning bridges. You're an upstart group, and you're never going to have any play in this town ever again. Sure. Right? Yeah, right. Well, fast forward a month later, she withdraws her nomination, and then the White House, licks their wounds, and they nominate Sam Alito, who's awesome. Mm-hmm. And suddenly, hey, we like Sam Alito. Like, oh, good. Yeah. Wait a minute. We're back. Should I mention the fact that you thought we'd never work with you ever again? Or we just kind of let that one go?
That's a good one.
That's humility, politics.
Josh, fork in the road. You got one?
Barack Obama gets elected president. A lot of people are like, what do we do at this moment? It was a historic moment for a former slave country to have a black man elected president, right? And so we just thought, everyone was negative on him and certainly deserved it. I think his 8 years in office were horrible for the country. But when you're first talking about that moment where there was, in this country, a lot of people were really kind of excited. Like, here's an opportunity. But wow, maybe we're getting rid of some of our sins. I mean, obviously Gettysburg does most of that, right? But it was kind of a proud moment for a lot of people in this country because that's kind of a new thing. Would you have expected France to do something like this? Maybe not. So we thought, well, what can we do in this moment? Like, we're not certainly going to endorse this guy because everything he said in his campaign sounds horrendous, and it turned out to be true. But that doesn't mean we have to spike the football in his face necessarily. We can take this moment and say, hey, now here is, so we did this video, like, here was a man abandoned by his father, raised by a single mother, and he would become the first black president of the United States. And we did it with
the tagline, important to add, life, imagine the potential.
Because it starts out with like this, heartbeat, ultrasound, and I love some of the criticism we get from people. Like, there were ultrasounds like that in 1963. Yeah, we know, bro. Like, we get it. Like, we're not idiots, okay? We're helping to paint a picture here, okay? But it really did, like, I knew it was effective when the Washington Post was like, front page was like, can you believe what this organization is doing? It was a news story, but it's essentially what they're getting at. But they're like, what? And there's some other conservatives. I remember Brent Bozell was like, wow, like you guys are on a different wavelength.
Can you briefly explain, so what was the twist of the video that caught so much controversy?
Well, I mean, just the fact that we would use like his story to say, hey, abortion is a bad thing. Like,
Right, we would celebrate the life of Barack Obama for a pro-life video.
Now, Richard Nixon, when he was president and they, came into the White House, he was the guy who did all the tapes and stuff like that. And Nixon, I think, had a lot of good things going, but he was certainly not pro-life. And like he was thinking to himself, like, what would be a reason why abortion might be a good thing? And he's like, oh gosh, mixed racial couple. Yeah. Like that was the mentality of the time for people, in the 70s of that age. Like, oh, that might make sense because there's such a stigma. Right? And so it was a big deal for a woman in 1964 to give birth to a black baby, a white woman, and to raise that baby. Like, that was a big deal. And like, that was exactly the reason why people in that time would have been like, if abortion were legal, that would be an option you should really consider. Yeah. It's like, no, actually, abortion isn't the answer.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting context. I didn't even know that. Okay, so this is a little future facing, but where do you see Catholic Vote in 10 years?
Well, I mean, I think, we've touched on certain things that we've done, like trying to, win the imagination and the hearts of American people, like Catholics, obviously. I'd like to hopefully, take that to, keep building on that. I mean, we have a daily email that's been successful. We have a podcast I think people are resonating well with. But are there other things, and you mentioned earlier the lifestyle section, like, is there, we most of what we've done so far has been a general audience. Now, are there ways that we can take certain segments of and try to, hone that message and reach that audience better? That might make more sense, like Catholic Vote Women or whatever.
Yeah,
there's options.
It kind of reminds me of, so we just talked to Carrie Grass. We just had her on, go check out that episode. But she was talking about how like things that women like are kind of being invaded by crazy left-wing ideologues. So why not create, magazines or create soap operas that like are actually beautiful, done by people that actually care about you instead of like gross feminism, whatever, like reaching people where they're at.
Well, I was talking about someone of this the other day too. It's like, I think in too many ways, like conservatives or traditionalists or whatever, just complain about it. Things and my mantra has always been, don't just complain about the media, be the media, do it. And so there's a new magazine like Evie, if I'm even pronouncing it right, and it's a bunch of women who are on the conservative side of things. Maybe they're not as conservative as you are or I am or whatever, but they just said, let's do a fashion magazine. We actually like fashion and let's talk about it. We like to see clothing. I'm like, go for it. I have no interest. Obviously, I'm a dad of 6 kids. I've been off the fashion train for a long time.
But fashion can be beautiful.
Yes,
it can be beautiful and edifying.
And you can, and in the process of doing that, you can start maybe bring things up, but it's not going to be, if it's a catechism, the magazine's not going to work. So you kind of bring up things in a soft way, and then, you can kind of talk about things that matter. And mostly, it's not going to be horrible that you're doing things. So why can't there be other things like that? Like, why can't it be for other aspects, not just fashion, but like, for men, like fishing, hunting. I'm a typer, I'm a writer. I'm not on any of that stuff, but go for it,
So I'll answer the question 2 different ways. I would say one of the things people say, you need an elevator pitch for your organization. What's that, the 5 seconds or less, so you can tell people what you do. And we used to use the line, although less so now because maybe it sounds more risky, but we used to say, Catholic Vote is for Catholic voters what the NRA is for gun owners. And what does that mean? It means politics, education, advocacy. We're their voice. But there's some significance to that because when it comes to politics, the NRA is pretty big dog.
They are very effective.
They shape our political discourse. They shape elections. In fact, I would argue that if the NRA chooses to oppose a candidate, especially in several states, that candidate has no chance.
It's death, right?
And I would like to think that because the Catholic vote is so large and of significance, in 10 years, we can flex significant political muscle where at least, ideally, a candidate from either party, we'll see where the parties head, but that you have to get the Catholic vote imprimatur to succeed, at least in a national race or maybe even some statewide races.
It's always easier to be to do a veto. So like what you mentioned with the NRA saying, this guy is too far, you got to stop, you can't do it, we can't support that. That's easier to pull off than to get the blessing, but that would be a great goal.
The second piece of the answer would be what Josh said, and he's used this line, I think he stole it from somewhere, but I don't know if I'll give him credit. Don't complain about the media, be the media. There is no question one of the most successful things we've done is the Loop. Compliments to Josh and his team. And without disclosing too much here, we are actively working on plans for some significant new enhancements to the Loop. So much so that, your little morning email will just be the beginning. So a little tease there. And if we're successful with that, I think we'll be able to go to not from 500,000 to 1 million to maybe hopefully multiple millions of people where we are truly exercising the kind of influence that I think a Catholic lay organization ought to be. And I think in doing so, we'll have a lot of say in what happens both in our church and in the country.
Agreed. So Brian, we're about to go to our very secret retreat in an undisclosed location, and I know that you've probably prepared some inspirational material. Would you like to end us here with a little bit of inspiration for people watching this have definitely consumed some Catholic Vote media in one way or another, either the emails or the Loop. So these are people that we know pretty well. Do you have anything for people before we?
All right, so I know this is bad. I'm pulling out my phone here, but you know what? The most inspirational thing that I want to do is read the theme of our retreat. And we picked this quote. It was from St. John Paul II from World Youth Day, and I forget which year it was, but it's actually kind of long. I got the complaints because it was too long.
I liked it.
But the theme is this, and it's a quote. It is Jesus you seek when you dream of happiness. He is waiting for you, and nothing else you find satisfies you. He is the beauty to which you are so attracted. It is he who provokes you with that thirst for fullness that will not let you settle for compromise. It is he who urges you to shed the masks of a false life. It is he who reads in your hearts your most genuine choices, the choices that others try to stifle. And then the second little part here, it is Jesus who stirs in you the desire to do something great with your lives, the will to follow an ideal, the refusal to allow yourselves to be grounded down by mediocrity, the courage to commit yourselves humbly and patiently to improving yourselves in society, making the world more human and more fraternal. Can't say anything more inspiring than that.
Can you top that? You got it?
I'm not going to try to upstate him. He's good.
Absolutely not. So,
It's
gentlemen,
only a
thank you.
saint, so
Yeah.
Good source.
Thank you for joining. As people know, we sign off with St. Thomas More, St. Fidelis, Our Lady of Guadalupe. Pray for us.
Pray for us.
Take care, everyone. We'll see you on the next one.